Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. Now I'm going to be starting in a little while information about fingering charts, but I want to redo some information about timing. I just want to kind of review it a little bit and maybe solidify what you've already learned. It's just kind of like a review, because once you learn something about timing, every so often you need to go over it again if you're not used to it. If you're not used to playing with timing and counting notes and things like that, you really need to review that so that you'll remember it. Because if you're playing with an orchestra or a band, you've got to be able to read the music, and that's what it's called. It's called reading the music. Music is a language, and when you read it, in your mind you're counting the notes, and you know what this note is, and you know what that note is, and you know how to finger it, and you know how to play it. Now you have to know how to time it. Where in the measure is it? How many beats does it get? So I just want to review this with you before we get into the interesting thing about the fingering charts, because you can get some fingering charts that are very interesting, some that are kind of fun, some that are difficult to read. So I want to get into this timing thing first. So first of all, I'm just going to put up some charts, and I'll just put them up one at a time. And if we could get kind of a read on that. Now, I've gone over you the time signatures. Here I've got 4/4, 3/4, 6/8, and 2/2. Those are going to be very common time signatures. So what do they mean? This top number is going to mean how many beats to a measure, and this bottom number is going to be what kind of a beat gets one beat. What kind of a note gets one beat? So this is how many in a measure, how many beats to a measure, and what kind of a note gets one beat. Well, just to take this 4 beats to a measure, and then a quarter note is which is indicated by that 4. That 4 means quarter, and that kind of a note gets one beat. Now, obviously, you're not going to write all your music with quarter notes, but it would have to be a quarter note or 2/8 or something that makes it equivalent, so you get the 4 beats to the measure, but the quarter note is one beat. Now, in 3/4 time, that's like waltz tempo, and you would have 3 beats to a measure, and here again, the quarter note gets one beat. Anytime you see that 4, it stands for a quarter, and you have 4 quarters to a whole measure, 4 quarters to get the 4 beats. Now, this is 6/8 time. You can also use it for waltz tempo, but in this time you have 6 beats to a measure, and an 8th note gets one beat. So you've changed things around here. The 8th note gets one beat, which means a quarter note would get 2 beats, because a quarter is twice as long as an 8th. Now here you have 2/2 time, and that's 2 beats to a measure, and a half note. That 2 would stand for a half. That gets one beat. So you would have 2 half notes that make 2 beats, because a half note would get one beat. So that's a change right there. So most of the time we're going to be dealing with 6/8 time, 4/4 time, 3/4 time, probably. But there's lots of other ways of writing music, so I just want you to be aware of that. The quarter, the 4, stands for quarter note. The quarter note has a body and it has a stem. No flags on it. An 8th note, if you see an 8, it stands for an 8th note, and the 8th note has a body and the stem, 1 flag. The half note would be like a clear note with a stem. It stands for 2 beats. 2 stands for a half. If you think of it as being the same thing as money, it'll be easier maybe to remember. 4 quarters equals $1. 4 quarters equals a whole. And in the half note, 2 half pieces, 2 50-cent pieces equal a full dollar. The half is just half of the whole. 4 quarters for $1. 2 half two 50-cent pieces for $1. And if you can think of it that way, it's like fractions. You just subdivide and subdivide and subdivide. We're not getting into the 32nd notes. We're not getting into the 64th notes, but it's all relevant here. So let me take this down, and I will show you another chart here. I've got 2 or 3 of them that I want to show. How can you make for one beat? How can you get one beat? What are the combinations? You know, when I first started these music shows, I think in my first year, and I've been here for quite a while, in my first year, I had a little exercise that I did on television. I drew out money, and like quarters, dimes, pennies, and so forth. And I said, how many ways can you get 32 cents? And I had about 6 pages where I drew out money, different combinations to equal the 32 cents. And so in a way, music is the same thing. You know, how many ways can you write something to get what you want, to get the right beats? Well, right now we're looking at one beat. 1 quarter, here we have 4/4 time. 1 quarter, of course, is 1 beat. But 2/8 is 1 beat, because an eighth is half of the quarter. Now, 4/16 is also 1 beat. How come? Because this eighth, it will split off into 2/16. This eighth will split off into 2/16, so you get your 4/16, and that's a total beat. Those two are a total beat, and this one is also a beat. But you also can have a dotted eighth and 16th. A dotted an eighth and 16th is going to be 1 beat, because what you have is 3. This is here, the 16th is a 16th note, and you see it looks like an eighth, but it's got that extra flag. A 16th note has 2 flags instead of 1. The eighth note, if you split it in half, would be 2/16. If you add a dot, it makes 3/16. Why? Because a dot is half the value of the note that preceded it. So the eighth note is equal to 2/16. If you take a half of that, that'll be another 16th. So that's equal to 3/16. And here's your 4/16 right here with that double flag. So that's considered to be 1 beat. It's like these 3 combined and then that one added on to it. It still adds up to 4/16 in the long run. Let me review that. An eighth note is got 2, if you split it off, is 2/16. A dot means that you have an extra value by a half of whatever this note is valued. This note is valued for 2/16, and then if you split it off, a half of that would be 1/16. So you add that 1/16 and you get 3/16, and this is the 4/16 right here with the extra double flag. This is an eighth note, and this is a 16th note because you've added that second flag. And an eighth note has 1 flag, but a 16th note has 2. And so this is actually the same as this, except you would hold these 3 together. Remember, we talked about having a tie or a hold, where you hold the note longer and you add another to it and you play it as if it's 1. Well, this is played like it's 1 note, but it contains 3 of these, and then this would be this one over here. I hope that's clear to you. So this dotted eighth and 16th is going to be 1 beat. You could also use triplets. A triplet is 3 notes to 1 beat. Oh, you have a little archway over it and a number 3 to indicate that that's a triplet. Otherwise, you wouldn't know. You might think they're just 3 eighth notes put together, which you could do as well. But if you want it for 1 beat, you've got to signify that. That's a triplet, and it's equal to 1 beat, and all those notes are together as 1 unit. Now, in terms of rest, you have to have rests that equal the same amount as notes. So you have, this is the quarter beat rest. This is the eighth beat rest. It has 1 flag on it, just a line with 1 flag, and the 16th is just two flags. Now I also could put a whole rest or a half rest. I didn't do it here. I've done this before, but I just want you to get the timing of it. So how do you make 2 beats? Well, you can make 2 beats by adding 2 quarters together. You can have a half note, that's worth 2 beats. You can have you can have 1 and 2, and you could have 4 eighth notes. That's worth 2 beats, because this 2 eighths are 1 beat, and this 2 eighths is a second beat. It has that 1 line, and that's the equivalent of 1 flag, and eighth notes get 1 flag. So that's one way of writing eighth notes. Then you have one with the flag up, the stem and the flag up, or the stem and the flag down. It's still the same thing. That 1 flag indicates it's going to be an eighth note. These 2 together, this line here, makes them both eighth notes. So that's how you do that. And remember, you could have 16ths. This is 4 16ths is a beat, and 4 16ths is a beat. So that's the way of getting 2 beats. 1 beat, 2 beat. Here's your 1 beat here for your dotted eighth and 16th. You have your triplets right here. That's another beat. And then on this measure, you have triplets, so that's 1 beat, and then the quarter rest, and that's the second beat. Then you have your 2 beat rest, which is a little rectangular looking thing, and it is on the top of the 3rd line, the 3rd staff line up. You can count 1, 2, 3, and that little boxy thing there is a half of a beat. It's a 2 beat rest. You could have 2 quarter rest. That'll make a half beat rest. You could have 4 eighth, and that would make it that way too. Or 4 16ths on 1 beat, another 4 16ths on another beat. That makes that 2 rests. You can do it any way you want. And then here's your whole note. That'll be 2 beats, because the time signature says 2. And so in this case, it'll be 2. So you see, when you're writing music, there are a lot of combinations that you can have to make for the amount of beats that you want to have in that measure. Let me take this down, and let me put up how to get 3 beats. How would you get 3 beats? Well, if you have a whole note, that'll be 3 beats. It's 3 beats because the time signature says that there are 3 beats to a measure, so that's the only note in the measure. It's worth 3 beats. You could have 3 quarters. You could have a dotted half. Remember, that dot is important. A half note is usually 2 beats. The dot adds half the value of that. That makes it 1 beat longer. That automatically makes that for 3 beats. You could have 6 eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and is the way that you would count it. It's like taking these 3 beats and splitting them in half. You get eighth notes, but since they're shorter, they are equivalent to the 3 beats. Then you can get triplets, 3 sets of triplets. And remember, triplets are 3 notes to 1 beat, and that number 3 indicates that's what it is. So I've got a 3 on top of all of these. I didn't put the little archway in. Sometimes you see it, sometimes you don't. But you know from that 3 that this is going to be a triplet, and the triplet is going to be 3 notes per beat. Then here is a combination. You have a 2 beat rest. That's the 2 beat because it comes up from the 3rd line. And then this is the 3rd beat right here. You have a quarter beat. So 1, 2, 3. You're not playing in that measure at all. But that's one way of showing that that's all 3 beats. You could have 3 quarter beats. You could have also 3 sets of 4 16ths. That's also going to be 3 beats when you take it totally, because all of the 4 16ths is 1 beat, 2 beats, and 3 beats. Now, how do you get 4 beats? Well, 4 beats is usually what we use. You get the whole note, that's 4 beats. 2 halves will be the whole note, so that's 2 beats, 2 beats each, but it's equivalent to the 4 beats. You could have a dotted half, which is 3 beats, add a quarter rest, and that's 4 beats right there. You could have 4 quarter notes, each one is worth 1 beat. Remember, 4 beats to a measure. You could have these sixteenths. Now, I don't know how easily you can see this, but this is sixteenths. These sixteenths is 1 beat, and you have 4 of the sixteenths. It's like having this as 1 beat, only it's all rest. It has 2 flags on it, so that whole thing is one beat. Then your half rest, which is 2 beats, so that's 1, 2, 3, and the quarter rest is the third one, is the fourth one. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Each case, you get 4 beats out of this. You could have your eighth notes, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. You could have 4 dotted eighths and sixteenths. A dotted eighth and sixteenth is a little bit like this, combining these 3 and then adding that one. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4 beats. You could have 4 sets of triplets. Each set of triplets is 1 beat, and you've got 4 of them there. You could have a fourth rest, a full rest, which is 4 beats, and nobody plays on that, or if you have that, you don't play. Then you could have the sixteenths. 4 sixteenths is 1 beat. The triplets is another beat, and then you've got 2 quarter rests, so that's the third beat and the fourth beat. You don't happen to be playing it because it's rest, but you see all of that is equivalent to the fourth beat. So you see what you can do. You can do all kinds of things, and you can just get it so that it is all equivalent, so it adds up to the number of beats that you want. Now, if you want an extra beat in a measure, all you'd have to do would put a sign, like you want, say you want 4 beats or 5 beats, you could have put another key signature like 5/4. That would be 5 beats to the measure. A quarter note would still get 1 beat, and you could add an extra rest or something to make that 5 beats. So you can add and change if I wanted to. I mean, there's a lot of little queer things I could do. If I wanted to, I could say 50 beats to a measure, and a quarter note gets 1 beat. I mean, I've never seen it done. There wouldn't be any reason to do it, but technically it could be done. I could have 50 quarter notes for 1 measure, and every quarter note is worth 1 beat. Well, that means I could have 100 eighth notes, because you can split it down that way. There wouldn't be any logical reason to do it, but mathematically it works. So remember, you can always switch around and get different ways of combining notes to make for the number of beats that you want to have in the measure. So when we say 4/4, a quarter note gets 1 beat, but a quarter note, or its equivalent, which would be 2 eighths, or it could be 4 sixteenths, or it could be eighth notes, or it could be rest, or it could be dotted halves. It could be any of those things. You can put them together, and as long as you make the number of beats that you want in the measure. Now, once in a while, you'll get some older music that doesn't have a time signature. And usually I end up by counting it like it was 4/4 time, but some measures may only have 3 beats, some measures may have 5. But I count it as if it's 4/4. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. So not all music has time signatures, but the greatest majority of music does. Now I'm going to show you something else, and it'll just I've got the time to do it. And the way that music is written, it's kind of interesting. Let's see. Here is, I'm missing a music stand. I just want to show, I really need the music stand because I want to show you that something, and I want to put it on the music stand. I don't know why I didn't think of it, Rick. Thank you. Okay, so here's a piece of music. It's a hymn. And I'm not focused on you being able to read it. I just want you to see how complicated it is and how I've simplified it. I rewrote it, you see. I rewrote it with a different time signature and all of that to make it easier to play. Oh, that's good. You can see, here's a dotted eighth and a 16th that's attached to another eighth note. And the time signature is, let me see, the time signature is 6/8 time. And the key signature is 4 flats. Now, 4 flats a recorder's not going to play. I can play 2 flats fairly easily. I can fudge out a 3rd flat as long as it doesn't appear too frequently in the music. 4 flats is something that the recorders cannot do. Can't do well enough for us to write music with it. But take a look at all of these notes. They're all eighth notes. This is a dotted eighth, a 16th, and this is attached to another 16th. So that makes it a little hard to read if you're not used to that kind of music. It's like 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and. It's just the way it's written. And then you see you have everything as 16th. Sometimes it has, if you look over here, you have the 16th note and reversed it. The 16th note, then the dotted eighth, connected to another eighth. And then you have a series of holes and accidentals, D sharp, D natural, and so forth. And looking at that, that looks quite complicated. If I was to write that music down and just use the melody line, see, this is the melody line on top. This is a line connecting the treble clef and the bass clef. And it basically means that you're going to be playing them or singing them together. There are 4 verses here, so you could just go back to the beginning and do each verse separately. But the thing is, that line means you're playing it separately. You have the flats, the same amount of flats on the treble clef as you have the bass clef, and it's written in the same kind of way. Lots of dotted eighths, lots of just plain eighth notes, and it looks like it's going to be very hard to read. So what I did, this would be soprano, alto, tenor, and bass, which is what a lot of music is written for. So I took the melody line and I wrote it out just with the melody line itself. I just did a manuscript, 4 flats, 6/8 time, and then all of these little eighth notes, dotted eighths, 16ths, put them together, you have the whole song. Well, there might be a much easier way of playing it. Why don't I take and rewrite this song and do it? I can do it, it's in public domain, so I can't get in trouble with it. Instead of doing the 6/8 time, why not do it in 3/4 time? Why not make all of these eighth notes quarter notes, which is going to be much easier to read than if we do it in 6/8 time. 6/8 time is fine if you're used to it, and it was written that way. But it actually will be a lot easier if I switch the time signature and I switch the key signature, and I keep it with the same kind of melody. So that's what I'm going to do. I have 2 copies of this, and I have just about enough time to do this. This I have rewritten at 3/4 time, quarter note gets 1 beat, and you have the whole hymn, and I hope I've got enough time to do it. I'm going to try playing it for you. And I'm probably going to play it a little faster so I can get into this time period. So it is a hymn called Softly and Tenderly, Jesus is Calling. I'm playing this. What you saw before was what it was written in. So just to go through it. Now, if you just look at it, the way I had it, the way it was written, doesn't it seem as if this would be a much easier way to read it than this? I don't understand why people take the hardest way sometimes to write something. If you're used to it, it's all right. But if you're not used to it, I have the same song written in a different style, in a different way, but it's the same song. And well, technically it's not, because I changed the key signature as well. I put it in a different key that's much easier to read. 4 flats would be difficult to play. Many instruments can do it, the flutes can do it, the recorders can't. So I switched the key, I switched the timing, and if I were to play with that, with the way that it was written here, it would sound exactly the same way, except the key would be different. But it would be the same melody line and the same timing. So there are different ways that you can do certain things, and you can change things if you need to. I do that frequently if I feel that I want to, if I feel it's going to be easier. But remember, if you're doing it with a choir and they're singing, you have to keep it within the range of what the voices can handle. Instruments can handle sometimes a lot more than what voices can in terms of ranges. So I'm going to close it here. I'm running out of time anyway. This gives you a chance to see what you can do with the timing. And so I'm going to continue next time on the same vein, except I'm going to start things about fingering charts. And so please join me then.